These are the 24 top AI tools that I use as a developer in 2026, and I'll be ranking them from E to S tier based on how useful they are in my day-to-day work. Over the last few years, I've tested probably more than 100 AI tools, but most of them just turned out to be a wrapper around the popular LLMs like GPT or Claude, but these 24 are the tools that are actually worth your time. And here is the simple framework that I usually use to decide whether the tool is worth it or not. So you take the time that it saves you per month and your average salary hourly rate. So let's say most of these tools cost around 20 to 30 bucks per month, which is pretty cheap for a tool like this. And you compare that with your hourly rate. And if it's more than $20 per hour, let's say, then if you buy it and it saves you 1 hour for the month, then it's well worth it. And in reality, it will probably save you more than 1 hour per month. And in reality, you probably make more than 20 bucks per hour because you're a developer. So let's start with the first one on the list, which is ChatGPT. And I'm sure this doesn't need an introduction. Everyone knows what this is. This is the most popular tool. This means like interacting with the ChatGPT on the web, so that version. I think it's not as useful as the other tools that we will discuss, like the LLM models, but recently it got pretty good with the release of GPT 5.2 and with the advanced reasoning models. So I will probably place this as a B tier. As a developer, you can brainstorm things with it, or sometimes there are complex tasks that like Claude Sonnet fails, but GPT succeeds to fixing. So that's why I'll be ranking these as a B tier. Next, we have Claude, which comes with the web version. So on the web, you have the Sonnet 4.5 or whatever the recent model is, and you have the Opus, which is the most advanced coding model. The Claude tends to solve coding challenges better because I think it's better in the benchmarks of the coding. So if you have any complex things that you need to solve, Claude usually does it better. And I'm talking here about only the web version. So still like on the web, you can brainstorm some coding solutions with it. You can ask it for diagrams for systems, or like give it the solution that you have and ask it to give you feedback. I think this does a bit better than ChatGPT, but as I said, like sometimes GPT 5.2 does better, but that's just sometimes. So more, I would say like more consistently, Claude is better than the GPT models at this moment. For that, I will just rank this a bit higher. So let's say A tier as in the tool list. Then we have Gemini. So Gemini is probably the weakest out of this, although they released a new version that is like trying to catch up with GPT and Claude. But yeah, it's been behind these tools generally. So I would say like C or B tier, it's starting to catch up with GPT, but still not as useful. I tend to use more GPT and Claude than Gemini, so I will rank this as a C tier. Another popular one is Grok, and this is the one that's released by the X team. This is still powerful and it's specialized, I think, for coding more as compared to ChatGPT, which is more a general model. But it's still not something I use daily. I use daily, let's say, GPT and Claude, and Grok is just sometimes I tried it for a couple of tasks, but generally I tend to go back with the GPT models or the Claude's Sonnet or Opus model. So I'll rank this similar to Gemini, the C tier. Now that was the category of daily AI tools, which are the web versions that we are interacting with. Next, we have coding assistants. These are the tools like IDEs or Copilots that you use for getting help with your coding. The most popular, or the one that got released like one of the earliest, is GitHub Copilot. So it was the first tool that was released, and the auto-completion is pretty good with Copilot. If you're writing some simple functions, it can auto-complete, and without you talking with it in the chat. It also comes with Copilot chat, which you can talk to in VS Code or in your editor, whatever you're using. But it's not as good as Cursor or Claude Code that we have now. That's why I think they made it also open source, so that developers will start contributing to it, and it might eventually catch up with the other tools, but at the point of this recording, it's not as good as the other ones. So I will probably rank it as C or B tier. And I know that some companies have this policy that you can use only the tools that they are using, that they have license with, and some of them are collaborating with Copilot and with GitHub, so you can't use, for example, Cursor or any other thing. So in that case, it's still useful. So I would use Copilot, especially the auto completion, to not start delegating everything to AI. But yeah, I would probably rank it as C or B or somewhere in the middle. Then we have Cursor, which is the most popular IDE probably for coding and AI assistance. This has been my go-to terminal in the recent year at least, so I didn't use VS Code at all, I think last year or maybe sometimes, but most of the times I'm using the Cursor because it has many power features. You can ask it to debug TypeScript errors by just clicking a button and ask AI, which points it directly to the chat with the specific prompts that you can just hit enter and get suggestions. And also for complex things with the recent features like the plan mode, with the other agent mode and chat mode, you have pretty much like all the flexibility to use it as you want. If you want like too much assistance so that it starts modifying files, you can set it in the agent mode, or if you want to just get suggestions, you can use it in the chat mode. I would rank this as A or S tier. This is something I use daily, so I will probably rank it like S tier. It's more useful to me than the Claude web version. But then we have also the Claude Code, which is still the product of Claude. If you subscribe to Claude, you also get access to the Claude Code. And this comes in a terminal version, but they also have an extension that you can install on VS Code or somewhere else, and that will give you access to it in the chat, similar to the Cursor that you have. The Claude Code tends to do better for complex tasks. Sometimes I had complex things that I needed to do and Cursor failed to assist with these challenges, while Claude Code was able to successfully solve it. For example, when it comes to upgrading major versions in the dependencies, like Claude Code can research and understand which dependency versions work with which ones, where Cursor just makes some upgrades without looking into the documentations, and then it fails doing that tasks or overall any other complex tasks. I think Claude Code is better in that, but still both of them, like now with the MCP servers, you can connect to the recent documentation, and that shouldn't be an issue for that specific task. But overall, this one tends to do better with complex tasks, but it's slower, where the Cursor is like faster. So if you have medium complexity things and you can specifically guide it to what to fix, what to do, what to implement, then Cursor is better because it saves you time, it works faster. But for complex things, Claude Code tends to do better. So both of them have their pros and cons. I would list both of them in the S tier. Next we have Windsurf. This is a tool that came and gained popularity very fast. Also in one of the companies that I worked with in the past, they were using Windsurf, and everyone in the company was pretty hyped up about this. They were saying that this is very good, it does everything as expected. I think that's probably because most of them didn't have much experience with AI tools, but after just comparing it side by side with Cursor on some tasks, like the same task I gave it to Windsurf and Cursor, it didn't do like even close job to what Cursor did. So it's not good for coding or AI assistance. I think it's even worse than Copilot. Now they transitioned to another niche, so they are not serving like solo developers. Yeah, I think this is generally not a tool for you. It's better to go with Cursor or with Claude Code. So I will list this probably D tier. Don't use this unless your company is using it and they have the subscriptions and they demand you to use that tool instead of the ones that you prefer. And next we have Codium. This I think is the same company that released also Windsurf, so it's the same one, but this one is an extension that you can install in VS Code, and I tried this as well alongside with Copilot back then, and this wasn't even as good as the Copilot was. So I will list this probably either D or E tier. The main thing that it has is it has a free tier, but again, most of the free tiers of these tools are not worth your time. So I won't just list it as a C tier just because it has a free tier. I won't recommend using it at all. So probably D or even E tier for Codium. Another tool on the list is Tab9. This is similar autocomplete tool as Copilot, and I think this was even around before Copilot came out. It tends to have more privacy for the code base, so if that's something you care more about, then it might have an edge over Copilot, but overall functionality wise, I think Copilot does a better job. So if you were to just compare them as how well it does for assisting you with coding, it does worse than Copilot. That's why I would rank it D tier. Then among coding assistants, I also have MCP servers. This is not specifically one tool. There are many MCP servers nowadays that you can use, and these are very useful. And when you connect to the AI tool that you're using, that is when you start to use it to its best capabilities, because it gets context about the latest updates from the tool. Like if you're using Next.js or React, then it knows the latest best practices and latest documentation, so it can suggest you better code to write. And it also gets access to, let's say, AWS documentation. If you're using it, it gets access to Stripe if you're integrating it with some payment processor like Stripe or PayPal, and many other MCP servers that are very useful, and most of them integrate with the popular tools that you're using. So this is again something that I'm using every day along with the coding assistants that I'm using. So for that reason, I will rank this as S tier as well. And that's it for the most popular coding assistants that I'm using. After that, I have some work-related AI tools that I'm using regularly. For example, I have Whisper AI, which is a text-to-speech. Like when you speak, it transitions it into a text, so transcribes it. And this is useful if you're going to give AI a pretty huge prompt that you're going to write. Instead of writing, you can just talk your mind, whatever you're giving instructions about, and it transcribes it into a text, so ends up saving you time for instead of writing and typing on the keyboard. So if that's something you also prefer, it might be useful. But I will rank this as B to A tier because it's not as useful, and I might have days where I'm not using it at all. So yeah, something useful, but not something as like S tier. Other than that, I have Loom. So whenever I'm, let's say, creating a pull request, I sometimes attach a Loom explaining what the solution is and why this PR exists. Or if I'm writing documentation in Confluence and then there is something that can be interactive, like explaining how it works or showing in the video. For these reasons, I'm recording a short Loom video, and I also use this in the mentorship program for, let's say, giving feedback to the guys who are writing code, so that I can just share a short video going over the functionalities and the code. So it's pretty useful. I'm using it probably, if not every day, then every other day. And for that reason, this is for sure an A tier for me. And why is this included in AI tools? Because it's not like necessarily AI first tool, but it gives you AI titles automatically summarizes and transcribes it. So it has AI functionalities, and overall it's a useful tool. Then for writing, I use Grammarly. So whenever I'm writing anything like a documentation or any text that I'm writing, I always use Grammarly to double check the grammar and the typos that I have in the writing. So Grammarly is a pretty useful one. I'm using this probably already 3 years, and I recommend you go with the Pro mode because it gives you many extra functionalities that are very handy when it comes to writing or rephrasing whatever you wrote. I will again list this as in the A tier. Next, we have automation tools. It's not only for developers, but developers also use it sometimes for automating workflows. I'm using it a lot for things that I see that can be automated so that it doesn't take my time every time when I'm doing the same thing over and over. The most popular one that you probably know is the Zapier. This is the one that I think is the most popular out of this, and basically you can trigger a workflow based on some event that happens. And there are many automations that you can set, but this video is not about that, so I will just be ranking these tools. In terms of Zapier, this gets pretty expensive if you're using it for many actions. So it gives you some, let's say 10,000 automations that you can run for the monthly subscription. And after that you have to pay extra. And if you have a high volume thing that you're doing, it might consume a lot of tokens for that. So overall, but it's a very useful tool. I'm using it. I will just rank this as a B tier for me. Next we have Na10. This one you can think of, it is way more customizable than Zapier. So Zapier gives you these drag and drop tools where you can connect to APIs and trigger workflows, send API requests, get data. Na10 is similar, but it comes with way more functionality, customization. You can build AI agents here, you can build automations. This is more useful for me than Zapier, but it's not as useful as like S tier tools. So I will just rank this as A tier. And another popular one is make.com. This is an alternative to Zapier, and it's a cheaper alternative, I think, or as far as the pricing goes. So for more action items that you're doing with make.com, you will end up paying less, but it's not more useful than Na10. I think Na10 is the best. If you're a developer, you know how to customize things, and it's best for you to go with Na10 in most cases. Make.com is probably somewhere around where the Zapier is, so B tier. The other category that we have is vibe coding tools. These are the tools that you just prompt and it builds you the whole application. These are the tools that like the solo founders are using, so they are just prompting something, getting back the code. Of course, you know that the quality won't be as good, of course, but it's a tool for those who don't know how to code and they can use it. But still, as a developer, it might be useful for you in sometimes where you're building, like, let's say the MVP, and you need a quick UI to connect with the backend that you're building and then later validate whether this is a good idea before you invest more time in building the project properly. So first one we have is the Lovable. This is one of the most popular ones. So you prompt it and it builds you the whole code base for the React frontend and everything that's needed. I personally don't use this at all, and I'll tell you which one I'm using now, but for this one I will rank it around D or E tier as a developer. Let's say D tier, because I will reserve E for the bold not new. The next one is V0. This one is specifically building it in Next.js, so if you're building something where you need a front end and back end as well, and it's an MVP that you still need to validate whether there is a market demand for that or not. So this I'm talking about if you're building something like a solo project to see how it goes. V0 can be pretty useful here because it will save you a lot of time, but you know that the downside for this is it will not produce the best quality code. So if it works out and there is a market demand for that, you will need to come back and fix a lot of things. But to get started, it's probably better than Lovable or anything, and it comes with the SEO optimization and everything. So I will rank it as a C tier. If you're building something and you need to quickly validate the idea, V0 is, I think, the best way to go. And the other one that we have is bold.new. This one builds it specifically in React, and I will rank it in the E tier because it's still a good tool, similar to Lovable or V0. But from my experience, if I'm going to rank them in between, I would say V0 first, then Lovable, then bold.new as a last thing if you're going to wipe code anything with AI. And the last category is the design and diagram tools, and one of these is the most asked tool here that you're always asking in the comments. I'm replying as much as I can, but I can't reply to everyone, so you will see the tool that I'm using also for the diagramming. Let's start with the Canva, which is a design tool. Again, similar to Loom, it's not an AI first tool, but it contains AI functionalities like Magic Expand, like editing photos with AI. So it's pretty useful for me since I'm generating a lot of like videos and content. So I usually use Canva a lot. As a developer, you probably won't use it that much, but if you need some images to be generated or some minor UI components that you are going to use, like icons, it can still be useful. So for me, I would say this is in A tier. For you, this is in B or C tier. Next one we have is Figma, the most popular design tool that we are using to convert design into code with HTML, CSS. So Figma is probably the most useful one out of the diagram tools, because if you're collaborating with designers in your company, you're probably using Figma most often, and there are some alternatives, but I would say like most of the companies I worked with, they were using Figma for the design, and you need to at least learn the functionalities. And if your company doesn't purchase the dev mode for Figma, I will still highly recommend you to purchase it, because it's very useful and it saves you a lot of time, and it comes with plugins that can convert it into code automatically, so you are not wasting your time on writing custom CSS when it's already written in dev mode, and you can just validate whether it's properly done or not, and if not, you can just change some things but not write it from scratch. And I will rank this as a B tier, so not as useful as the coding tools that you need to use, but still worth knowing and using it. The other one is Miro. This is the one that I am creating diagrams with, and not as often as the other one that I will share, but this is the one I was using last year, I think, the most. And here you can basically create flowcharts, you can create brainstorming sessions with the team, and it's pretty useful. Companies especially are using this more for brainstorming, like say retrospectives of the sprint. So it's useful to know at least the functionalities. You might not need the Pro subscription because it allows you to work in the free mode as well. If you're going to use their Pro icons and you need more projects, then you need to pay for it, but otherwise you don't need it as much as the other tools that I highlighted here. So this probably goes into C or B tier or somewhere in between. And then lastly, the tool that I'm using more often nowadays for diagramming, this is called Eraser, and it's the one that I'm right now creating in, for example. So this is the tool I started using more often because it contains diagram as code, and the advantage of that is that you can easily feed it into AI, and now AI has the knowledge on how the system is designed, instead of just working on the small microservices and not knowing the full context on how the system is overall designed. And not only that, I think it looks better than the Miro diagrams, and it's the one that I'm basically using whenever I'm designing some systems or parts of the systems, or creating some diagrams and then feeding it into AI so it knows the context as well. And another good thing about that is the collaboration. You can easily share an editable link with your team, and then you can all start working on something together. So I will rank this at S tier. Not something I use every day, but whenever I'm using it, it's pretty useful. And these are all of the top 24 AI tools that I'm using in 2026, the ones that I use more often. And if you have anything that I don't have in this chart, I would be interested to know. So let us know in the comments what are the tools that you're using, and maybe you have something like some hidden gem to share in the comments.